Welcome to SAM Conversation, an online program of South Asia Monitor. Today we're going to discuss a very interesting book, Kashmir, the Land of Rishis, A Journey Through Time, penned by Brigadier Amreshwar Pratap Singh. Brigadier A.P. Singh, we are from the same school, St. Columbus, New Delhi. He also joined the National Defense Academy, got commissioned into the Corps of Engineers, and excelled in the sport of yachting, becoming the first national champion to represent India in numerous international championships. He's also an experienced ocean sailor and was a crew member on Trishna, which created history for being the first Indian sailboat to circumnavigate the globe in 1985-87. His thirst for adventure has taken him to explore new vistas after he retired from service. He's explored, I don't know how many temples, ancient temples of India, which are marvels of architecture and which, bear testimony to the kind of knowledge that ancient Indians had. His area of interest focuses on rich heritage of India seen through its ancient architecture, monuments, and knowledge systems. Now, as far as this book is concerned, I can only begin that on a negative note that it's India's misfortune that it got marauded first and then ruled for over 2 centuries by the British, who, before leaving it, changed its geography and made Kashmir one of the, you can say, they left Kashmir to be marauded further by the newly instituted Pakistan, and it's and also for reasons of the government, which initially gave it a special status of Article 370. Irreparable damage was done to a lot of its very ancient and very artistic monuments, temples. It's the land of Rishis, as Brigadier AP will bring out. Without going much into, because there is so much you can say about what has happened to Kashmir, I think I'll leave it to Amreshwar. All yours.
Thank you, Anil. It's a pleasure being on this channel once again. The last time was on the temple, the wonderful temple architecture, as you mentioned. This time is not on, on a similar line about our rich heritage. And the region, as you mentioned, is Kashmir. Everyone around the world would have definitely heard of Kashmir for either the right or the wrong reasons. So I'll actually take you back a little bit, as the title mentions, a journey through time. From its ancient times, how actually Kashmir geologically also got formed. So I'll be starting the book actually covers from that person. Now, I'll just, I've got a presentation. I'll just screen share that thing. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
So as the title of the book, which I have written, published recently, is Kashmir, the Land of Rishis, A Journey Through Time. So actually, Kashmir is and was since ancient times the land of Rishis, which all of us know. Many famous Rishis and sages have passed through Kashmir and stayed there. I'll be mentioning about them. So this book, the foreword of the book is written by General Dr. V.K. Singh, Union Minister, and also the former Chief of Army Staff. The preface is by another famous psychologist and author, Dr. Rajat Mitra, whose book, The Infidel Next Door, is actually a path-breaking book on Kashmir, because one of the first books which has written about Kashmir from a psychological angle. Published by Indus University, and the co-publishers are the Akshay Prakashan, old publishing house based in Delhi. Now this gives just the cover jacket of the book. You can see, just to mention all the photographs in the book, which you'll see, including on the cover you are seeing, they're all taken by me. So I have traveled through this whole area, took the photographs, and then I put the photos with the history and the write-up together. So the shivling which you see, it's actually a part of a shivling. It's not a murti, and it's one of those prehistoric shrines which is still there, though in bad shape, in Baramulla, and we'll see about these further. And on the book, a little bit, the comments which have been given by General V.K. Singh, it's basically about the history of the book. A lot of misconceptions and ambiguities are there. So I've actually attempted to clarify those things in simple language, because so that even a person who is not conversant with the scholarly works or those things can easily understand what the background is, how Kashmir was formed, the ancient history of Kashmir, and taken to the present day. And then the preface, actually Dr. Mitra has written about the photographs, which you can read the writing. The pictures are subtle, have a depth, and taken by a photographer who has a deep compassion to preserve the legacy of the temples and the inner architecture and the message they carry. So these are just a few of the comments on the book. Now, about the book itself, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of misconceptions about who the residents of Kashmir were and what was the origin, which basically is shrouded in I won't say mystery, but ignorance, because most of us are not aware of the background.
If I may just butt in, ignorance and confusion deliberately caused also.
Yeah, definitely. It's all these things are partly deliberate, because otherwise there won't be
Obfuscation,
misconception won't be there. So I've as my third point says, the book traces the history of Kashmir since ancient times, and an interesting facet of the book is that the names of all rulers of Kashmir from 3450 BC I have compiled them and listed as an appendix to this book. So this actually is will give a fascinating insight into the history of the region. Probably one will not easily find such a compilation anywhere in one place. And the book also describes numerous places, ancient places, knowledge about which has been lost over time because of various reasons. And as you mentioned, because of colonialization and other things, a lot of things have been lost. Now, not only for the scholarly sort of knowledge, even for those casually wanting to visit Kashmir, as we know, it's a very popular destination. So I provided details and photographs of many unexplored destinations. So even a normal traveler who wants, he'll have many new options to explore, because Kashmir, for most travelers, is just Srinagar, Gulmarg, or maybe Pahalgam, but there are so many other beautiful locations which one will learn through this book. So it basically caters to both the serious reader and the casual tourist. Now, the photos which you will see in this presentation, they're all my photos, and they are actually also in the book. So I've just taken a sample, get an idea of what the beautiful scenery. Most of us, of course, are aware. And as we all know, Kashmir is known as the Switzerland of India, and it's actually, most of us would also have been. The last point worth seeing is that unfortunately, because of the terrorist activities, tourism was restricted. But since 2019, there has been a influx of tourists, and last year there were nearly 19 million, 1.88 crore tourists which visited Kashmir. So that shows that now things are improving, and it's again becoming a popular destination and very safe for tourists. Now, a bit about the importance of Kashmir. Why is it such a disputed and area? So Kashmir has always been called the jewel in the crown of India. It has a great strategic importance because of its location, being on the trade routes of Central Asia, India, Tibet since ancient times. And in the colonial era, there was always that great game played between the British and the Russians. And once the British left, they have left it, as you mentioned, its status remained ambiguous, and it's always a part of the dispute between India and Pakistan. As I mentioned, the game continues. The participants have changed because new powers have now come into this scene, and so the disputed nature still continues. And lastly, the point I mentioned, we should not forget that Kashmir also occupies a very important place in India's civilizational history. So that also is a great importance. Another view you can see of the Pir Panjal Mountains. There's a place, Sinthan Top, another totally unknown place. Most tourists are not even aware of this place, but one of the most beautiful places to visit in Kashmir. So civilizational links, the name of Kashmir itself is derived from the name of Kashyap Rishi. He was one of the Sapt Rishis and the progenitor of mankind as per our scriptures. And Kashmir was also the seat of Kashmir Shaivism and Shakti worship since ancient times. And a lot of beautiful temples were constructed during the reign of the Hindu kings till 13th century. And Kashmir actually also, the last point, it has a written history which is unique of any region of India. Raj Tarangani, it is the only place in India which has a written history from the Mahabharata era till 12th century CE. So this actually gives a very unique status to the history which we know about Kashmir. Now, the book is actually divided into two parts. The first is the Itihas of Kashmir. It covers the history and the other things from the ancient times. And part two is a sort of a travel log, which I mentioned, the places with photographs, which anyone who wants to visit will be interested to see the places and the description. This is a bit of the contents. You can see it's in part one. You have the sort of historical scholarly portion, and part two is basically all these list of places which I've described with photographs. And in the end, you have the list of rulers which I mentioned from 3000 plus BC, and a few ancient maps of Kashmir, which gives the ancient names of places which in Sanskrit, which are there in ancient times. Of course, they have been changed over time to the new names. So the part one is the Itihas, or the history, which is loosely called in English language, though it's not accurate meaning of the word. And as I mentioned, Kashmir has played an important role in our history. Burzom is one of the oldest sites in Kashmir from the Neolithic area. Kashmir has been a part of many dynasties, which I have mentioned in the book also. It was a big Buddhist center also, and the fourth Buddhist council. It was a big council held in 72 CE, where a lot of famous scholars attended. And it's from Kashmir only. Kumar Jiva was a famous Buddhist scholar who traveled to China, and he's the one who introduced Sanskrit and our scriptures into China. He's also from Kashmir. And then many famous scholars have been there who have based on Kashmir. Abhinav Gupta was one of the very famous ones. His book Abhinav thing is there. Then Lalita Ditya is also, I'll cover a bit later, a bit more detail, one of the greatest kings in India. But unfortunately, most Indians have not even heard of his name. His empire was one of the biggest empires any Indian king has had. And Sharda Peeth, it was in the news recently, a few months back. It's actually in now Pakistan occupied Kashmir. It was built by, the temple was built in 237 BC by Ashoka, and it's a very famous center of learning and knowledge. A famous quote by Adi Shankaracharya is also mentions its status which it had as a center of learning and religious background. This photograph you see, it's the source of the Jhelum river. Jhelum earlier was known as Vitasta in the ancient times. So this is a spring which comes from underground, and the river starts from here. Sharda Peeth I mentioned separately. It's a very famous place, abode of Devi Saraswati. It was so famous that it had its own script also, Sharda script, which developed around the 3rd century. And it was one of the revered and known places of worship, comparable to Somnath and other such places. And as a university, it also was a temple university at par with Nalanda and Takshila. We may have heard of Nalanda, Takshila, but very few of us would have heard that Sharda also had a university of that level. And it was the spiritual mother of all Bharatiya Sampradayas. As you know, in Hinduism, we have sects. So this actually unifies all sects. They all were sort of under the overall umbrella of Sharda. And I've just brought out in the book also, I mentioned, actually Itihas is not history, which most of us refer to. There are many Sanskrit words which actually do not have an English translation because of alien, our philosophy and concepts are very alien to those of the Western Abrahamic religion. So there's actually no word, there are many words which cannot be described accurately. So that's why all our epics, we call them as Itihas and not history. And it is, I've described in the book, what is the difference between Itihas and history. This, anyone who's been to Gulmarg would probably remember.
Yeah, this is a very interesting aspect. If you could please just elaborate a little bit more on it.
On that
Itihas and history.
Okay, so as I mentioned, since, you know, our philosophy and concepts, they are totally alien to Western thought. So when those concepts don't exist in English, there are no words to describe many things which we want to convey. The basic, a common word, common usage word is caste, which we call, you know, caste, scheduled caste, you know, that caste, which is actually of Portuguese origin. But it is misquoted as being in our Sanskrit language, we are known as varnas and jatis. But caste is actually a totally different thing. Similarly, Itihas is not history. Puranas, as you know, they are the stories which are told in the Puranas. They are not myths. Generally, people assume it, you know, that Itihas and Puranas are history and myth. Same way, Atma is not soul, or Maya is not illusion, nor Prakriti doesn't mean nature. The Prakriti, the Sanskrit words, Prakriti, Maya, Atma, they encompass a much bigger sphere than, you know, what is conveyed by the English words. So Itihas, basically, its meaning is so it has been. So it is factual, those incidents have occurred in the past, but as you know, that our time, we don't follow a linear time scale like the English people do. We have a cyclic time scale, because in our thing, the things keep repeating over time. You have those cycles. So Itihas would have occurred. It may not fit in chronologically, those dates that way, but it is definitely, as I mentioned, they have to be regarded as interpretative accounts of past events in a cultural and spiritual context. So it's more than just a date. It will give more details about what happened with that incident. But definitely they are not myths, which our epics many times are portrayed to be. So this I mentioned. Then these two books I have given in detail. They're actually two basic books. Nilmat Puran is one, and the next one, Raj Tarangani, I mentioned. They are the ones basically which give the history from ancient times. From, as you can see, it's from the time of Mahabharat war, it is listed out. So these are the ones which are the basic sources for any ancient history of Kashmir. And as you may be aware that earlier Kashmir Valley was a lake, and it at one point of time it got drained out, and that is where the lake, that Kashmira is the thing which it started being called later. Now, if you see here, I mentioned that for 6 these manvantras. So now manvantra is since the beginning of the Kalpa, Kashmir was a lake. Now Kalpa is one day in the life of Brahma, and that is equivalent to 4.32 billion years. So that is our cyclic time scale. So in one Kalpa, there will be 14 manvantras. So now presently we are in the 7th manvantra, the present one. And during this manvantra, the lake drained out and the land was reclaimed, and Kashmir became a valley, and it was populated by Rishi Kashyap. So that's it. In brief, this is the start.
In fact, Srinagar itself, people seem to have heard only of Dal Lake. In that region itself, there's Nagin Lake. There's, I think 3 or 4 lakes are in that.
No, what you are saying is
Srinagar region itself.
No, those are small lakes. What I am saying, the whole Kashmir Valley, the whole valley was underwater. There was no land. The whole valley was a big lake. Matlab, you can say a sea sort of. So when that drained out the whole valley, then the land was reclaimed, and then that is how after that it got populated by Rishi Kashyap was the first person, and he married the 13 daughters of sage Daksha, and then it got populated thereafter. So as I mentioned that we are in the 7th manvantras. Now each kalpa has got 14 manvantras. So we are somewhere in the middle of this kalpa. And one kalpa is 4.32 billion years as per our scriptures. So, I mean, the time scales are sort of beyond imagination unless you have gone into it in great detail.
Then what happened when it got marauded by the Mughals?
No, these time scales I am saying are far, they're 10,000 BC, 15,000 BC, that scale. And what I'm saying is it has been proved geologically also. There have been fossils of sea life found in Kashmir Valley. If you read, I've quoted a few study papers in my book. Marine life has been found, fossils of marine life in the valley. So this is actually backed up by scientific evidence also. It's not only our scriptures are saying it. So this is the other book which actually, as I said, it's Kashmir is unique for having a written chronological history The name of the book is Raj Tarangini. Now, Raj Tarangini was written.
Raj Tarangini, of course, is the one which we've heard of.
Yeah, one would definitely heard of, because it's considered very authentic, because firstly it was written by a Brahmin, not by a court or a king. So it gives a reasonably unbiased account of the history. And he has quoted the first king of Kashmir started from 3450 BC. So I have actually reproduced the list of kings from 3450 till 1947. Every name is mentioned in my book in one of the appendixes. So that is one of the highlights of the book. So this actually Raj Tarangini is a very exhaustive. It consists of 8 volumes, and it gives a list and other details about that time. The things will how each king, what he did, military things, and the details of flora, fauna, all that is mentioned in that. Now, next, this is a photograph of that sun temple at Martin. One would have heard of it. It was built by Emperor Lalita Mukapidia. So it's one of the big temples, but totally in ruins. It was broken by the marauding Islamic invaders. Now, Lalitaditya Mukapidia I have given in detail here also. It's in the book, a sort of a separate section is given. One of the biggest emperors of India who we are not aware of. He ruled in 5th century CE, and he conquered most of India. So, this is Kannauj, Vindhyas, Orissa, Bengal, Konkan, Dwarka, Avanti, Punjab, Afghanistan, not mentioned even Assam. And externally, he conquered right up to Central Asia, Persia, Uzbekistan from there. So he had one of the biggest empires an Indian king has ever had. He actually also made a treaty with the Chinese. They became allies in their fight against all these invaders. And because of his treaty with the Chinese, he could focus his attention and, do all these other things. And very sketchy details about his exploits are available, surprisingly. And not only his military and sort of geopolitical expertise, he was also a great creator. That Martin Sun Temple, he built a magnificent capital. A lot of temples and stupas he built during his time. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, though he has done so much and one of the biggest kings, but very few written works are available about him or what actually no one has done. This is the artist's impression of Emperor Lalitaditya Mukapidia. So I got
Lalitaditya Mukapidia.
Pida. Now, about how the Muslims, what you were mentioning, how did they come in the scene? So actually, the first invasions started in the 8th century, and it took 6 centuries after the first invasion. It was only after 6 centuries that actually a Muslim king sat on the throne of Kashmir. So there were a lot of invasions, but finally it was in 1320s CE that the first Muslim Sultan, Salauddin Shah, became the ruler of Kashmir. So if you see in the overall time frame, the Muslim kings have come very late, as late as 1320. Whereas we have, so the last point I mentioned that before the first Muslim king became the ruler, there were 136 Hindu and Buddhist kings who ruled Kashmir from the beginning.
Over a period of 136 kings, over a period of approximately...
From that 3450 BC.
Okay.
So from that time, there were 136 kings before the first Muslim king came. So as you are aware that the hallmarks of the Kashmir kings in Muslim kings in Kashmir were their gardens and beautiful gardens. So this is a view of one of the gardens. And now in part two, the places which I mentioned a travelogue, I have mentioned, given a map of layout of the places I have mentioned in the book. So if you see, this is the whole valley, Kashmir Valley. There are mountains on this side, there are mountains on this side, and niche are the Pir Panjal mountains. So this whole valley, what I was saying, was a lake. It was not just the lake here or someplace. This whole valley was a sea, you can say. So this is drained out, and then all these places which I mentioned are covered in this map. So it gives a good idea to a tourist or anyone interested where they are located. A few important points like Amarnath cave is here where Abhi Yatra is on nowadays. Chandanwadi is the place from where you have to trek from there. So this place is Srinagar. This is the southernmost part, Veena, that Kazikond, that new tunnel which has been made on the national highway from Jammu. Jammu is down, and this road goes to Leh. So this is the basically map. So I have divided the places which I have mentioned. These are the sightseeing destinations for, worth seeing, visiting Gulmarg, Pahalgam, all these places. Many places, as I mentioned, Sintan Top, the Aharbal waterfall, beautiful places, and most of the tourists are not even aware that they exist. This Achbal is beautiful. Mughal gardens are there. So many places are there to see. Once one reads the book, you'll get to know many new destinations to visit. This is a photograph I have taken on the way to Pahalgam. You can see the beautiful scenery. And then these are the ancient shrines which I've described in my book with photographs of all these places. So these are ancient, like Shankaracharya temple in Srinagar, Kheer Bhavani temple. It's one of the most popular shrines. They have a few thousands of people every year, Mela. So these are the places. Baramulla is one of the most religious places in the old times. So there are many shrines there. That Shiv Murti on the cover of the book also is from here, one of the temples in Baramulla. So these are the temples which I've described, and I have described the background of each temple, why it is famous, what is the story or the itihas behind it, which Devi and how it was set up, the origin of that thing.
Does it emerge that some of the holiest of places are the ones which in post-independence India, when Kashmir got marauded, I'll say, a second time by Pakistan, or Pakistan supported terrorists or separatists who existed within Kashmir itself. Baramulla is one case.
No, there are many cases like that.
If you could, just throw light on which were the holiest and what happened to them, that would be great.
Once the Muslim kings came to power in 14th century, the destruction of temples started from that time. But there were many, many shrines survived. Ancient shrines also survived even till late. You'll be surprised to know that some shrines, the ancient murtis, like I'll give an example of this Mata Bhadrakali temple in Handwara. Handwara is an absolute remote area. This is the temple. Yes. It's very close to the border, and it's one of the worst terrorist hit areas even today. A tourist, it's not easy to reach there. Now like this temple, that the murtis which are there, they were the ancient murtis, continue to remain there. They were only destroyed in the 1990s when the genocide happened. As late as this, they were there till then. So though the destruction started from 14th century, but a lot of them survived. And actually, the credit for survival of these things goes purely to the Kashmiri Pandits' sacrifice. So many Pandits have sacrificed even their lives in trying to save the ancient murtis, hiding them, taking them away, keeping them, when the attacks used to happen. So the Kashmiri Pandits have played a great role in, surviving. So now actually the non-Muslim population of Kashmir is only Kashmiri Pandits. There's no other caste which has survived in Kashmir today. You have either Muslims or Kashmiri Pandits. You won't find Rajputs or scheduled caste or, basic.
Yes, but after this abrogation of 370, there may come a time when that may happen, because
Yeah, it will, but it will take a long time, because
it will
that
take a long time. It will take a long time.
confidence of people have to be built in.